And just as a teacher has a toolbox of professional knowledge, classroom skills and experience that they draw on to help students learn, PPTA has a toolbox of evidence, principles and experience that guides our thinking on professional and educational issues. It's called policy. And this august body is the supreme policy-making body in PPTA. Gatherings like this make it possible for PPTA to set the best course regardless of the weather. At these meetings, we are able to debate challenging issues, reflect on the evidence and differing viewpoints, and work our way towards solutions. It is in the nature of these things that our answers will not be perfect. Theory and practice never match up exactly, the one exception being Treasury, where the theory can never be wrong, so the reality must be. What we get out of conference are policies that have been tested by the membership and pronounced seaworthy. Policies are kind of like our warrant of fitness for our waka, te wehi aroa. And we may need to get them updated from time to time, and it doesn't prevent other careless and sometimes reckless sailors from crashing into us, and they won't help us if the powers that be open up the trade routes to privateers and pirates, but they keep us safe under normal circumstances. And that is why we greeted the Prime Minister's announcement in January about IES with cautious optimism. Like most members, we were bemused and somewhat suspicious, but we could see elements in the proposals that were entirely consistent with long-established PPTA policy, much of it debated and set in this very room. Let me elaborate. In 2007, Annual Conference adopted a paper titled An Advanced Qualifications Pathway for Secondary Teachers. This paper developed out of the Ministerial Task Force, which was a group set up in 2003 to report to the then Minister of Education, the Honourable Trevor Mallard. It arose in response to an intense and bitter standoff between PPTA and the government, which lasted for over a year. The task force was charged with developing a future-focused vision for the secondary teaching profession. In its submission to the Ministerial Task Force, PPTA argued that any pathways developed needed to be supported by structured professional learning, some of which should be able to be recognised in qualifications that would lead to pay increases. So, classroom-based career paths. Tick. In 2009, there was an annual conference paper from Executive entitled Mentoring for Secondary Teachers. This paper referred to the workstreams program through which the specialist classroom teacher had been developed and to more recent discussions within Te Huarahi and the Young Teachers Network about the need for teachers throughout their careers to be able to access professional support in the form of skilled mentoring. These mentors, it was argued, would be an expanded SCT with additional training to develop skills of observation, feedback and resource sharing. This is the recommendation members passed, that PPTA engage in discussions with the Ministry of Education on the development and resourcing of a cluster-based mentoring system for secondary teachers. So, career paths and mentoring, sharing best practice, tick. 2010, we were back talking about collaborative practice, this time for school leaders, in a paper entitled From Islands to Archipelagos, Developing Secondary School Leadership. Conference recommended that the government establish budget lines, processes and pathways between schools and education organisations so that experienced school leaders and advisors can share knowledge and skills across the sector. Proposals for school leaders to work together. Tick. In 2008, there was an annual conference paper titled Tomorrow's Schools, Yesterday's Mistake. This paper argued that the great experiment of tomorrow's schools had not led to an improved education system or rising student achievement, but had instead led to a system that encourages competition, parochialism and mistrust. It called for a review of tomorrow's schools to focus, among other things, on student achievement, fairness and equity, duplication of resources, school innovation, incentives to cooperative behaviour, democratic participation and support for teachers, collaboration between schools. Tick. And now I might be moving into living memory. Remember this from 2012? The report of PPTA's Quality Teaching Task Force, which you have in your packs. If you turn to pages 14 and 15, you will see a blueprint for IES. I've been out of the classroom too long. I shouldn't have told you about it till the end of the lesson. Teachers be able to move in and out of school to specialist positions, working across schools or within schools as facilitators of teacher inquiry or sharing evidence-based teaching practice. Community of schools teacher across schools. Tick. Of course, some of the catch in IES was a bit smelly and needed to be chucked back. Initially, it was being promoted as performance pay, and there was some loose comment from a particular Member of Parliament that achievement data, including national standards, would be used to appoint to the new positions. It was policy to the rescue again. PPTA does not support differential performance pay and certainly not simplistic results-based pay. Executive determined that PPTA should do what members expected to do. That is to act on their behalf in, quote, all matters relating to the bargaining and enforcement of my contract. The exact words from the PPTA membership form. We did the research, gathered evidence, talked hard and sometimes tough at the table, and succeeded in turning the original, completely unacceptable policy into something that was consistent with PPTA policy. Then we waited to see if Cabinet would accept the changes. We made it absolutely clear to all parties that without those changes, we would not be continuing in the process. The paper came back from Cabinet in June with agreement to all the changes that had been proposed, but there was still detail to work through. We continued working on the detail, and as promised, we will have something ready to take to members for their acceptance or rejection next term. There have been some charges levelled at Executive which I want to respond to. Firstly, that they should have sought a membership vote on the initial proposal. This issue arose because, for reasons I will never understand, NZEI ignored the amended proposal of June 2014, even though they had been present at all of the discussions and were represented on all of the working parties, and balloted its members on the original proposal that we had already rejected and had spent 8 months redesigning. The NZEI vote is meaningless. It would be like asking the electorate to vote in the 2014 election on the party manifestos of 2011. Number 2, that Executive is naive and was duped by the national government. I promise you, your Executive has been very clear-eyed every step of the way. We've used this OECD quotation extensively over the last few years, including at these conferences. The better a country's education system performs, the more likely that country is working constructively with its unions and treating its teachers as trusted professional partners. This government could have legislated these changes into place. It could have waited for negotiations next year and refused to settle without performance pay. It could have put the money in schools' operations grants and let boards and principals parcel it out to their favourites. They did none of these things. Instead, it did what we have been asking for. It offered to work with the unions to negotiate changes through our collective agreements. When a government invites a union to work with them as trusted professional partners, what is achieved by refusing to engage? What message does it send to governments about the value of working with teacher organisations? I want to assure everyone that despite the claims made, IES will not be imposed on anyone. Collaboration cannot be mandated. Communities of schools form voluntarily. No school has to join it if it doesn't want to, and it seems unlikely communities would want to compromise their effective operation by trying to force in a reluctant convert. It's the same for the new roles. Teachers will apply for them or not, as they wish. No teacher union can simply vote the policy away. The government is committed to the policy. It campaigned on it and will take its election win and its absolute majority as a mandate for it. The policy will be rolled out. The choice for PPTA and NZEI is a stark one. Either be part of the solution and ensure that all the operating details are openly and transparently set out in the collective agreements, or allow the ministry to undermine the collective by offering the money to principals and teachers as an individual agreement.